Hey friends, Chubby Meeple back with another Kickstarter preview. Today we're going to take a look at Seven Souls. Now this is a game from Inside Up Games. It's on Kickstarter until June the 5th, so you got a little bit of time left to check it out. Hopefully there'll be late pledges available in case you're checking out this video after the 5th. But I'm going to jump to the table, give you a brief overview of how the game plays, just a really quick look at it, no in-depth gameplay or anything like that, and then I'm going to come back here and tell you what I think of Seven Souls. In Seven Souls, you are competing with the other players to collect the most souls by the end of the game. The primary way you're going to do this is through visiting the three locations on the board. You have the university, the manor, and the church, where we will be sending our forces out trying to gain power, gather resolve, and of course collect souls. So the main way you're going to do this is through simultaneous card selection. So each of the players is going to throw a card down on each of these locations. Just as the game goes on, we're going to be throwing cards down here on all three locations. These cards will then be flipped over and resolved in an initiative order, and will allow the players to collect the various resources that are available at each of the three locations. Now the three locations here that we have are preset with resources, a number of resolve cards, soul tokens, and power tokens, and the numbers that are seated here are based on your player count. Each space has two numbers. You have, for example, this resolve card space shows a 15 and a 20. At the higher player counts, you'll use 20 cards here, lower player counts will be 15. And all of these spaces have the same amount. So if you look at the souls tokens here, we're using 11 because we're set up for a 3-player game, whereas if we had a larger player count, we would have 16 tokens here. The end game condition will trigger at the end of the round, in which one of these three locations has two of its resource pools completely depleted. So if, for example, the university here has the resolve cards and the power tokens depleted but still has some soul tokens left, the game will still end, will total up points. But let's take a look at the play. So we've played our cards up here to the three locations, and this is the main way the game is going to be played. And I'll cover some other rules and some other things that may happen as the game goes on. But I want to give you a good sense of how the game actually plays. So we have our three players have played their cards to the three locations. We're going to resolve these locations left to right, beginning with the university. Now, it's important to note that if you look at the top of these locations, there is an investigator that has been assigned or deployed, if you will, to each of the three locations. These investigators are going to be trying to foil our plans and will be attacking. They'll be attacking throughout the game. This particular investigator, for example, is looking to take two resolve cards from us if we can't defend against him, and he's going to be attacking the players that are in the middle. That will make more sense in a second. The Investigator deck that we have off to the side of the board, where your other investigator cards are located, the back of the card actually indicates which location is going to get attacked. So this cross indicates that the church location will be the location getting attacked. And so this particular investigator, at the end of the round, once all player turns have been resolved, this investigator is going to attack the lowest, the people in the back of the pack, and is also going to be looking to take two resolve cards if those players or that player can't defend themselves. So we have our cards played. We begin with the first location, which is our university. Cards are flipped over in the order they were played. So we simply just take these and flip these over. They are then arranged in numerical order. So your numerical values in the upper left-hand corner of the cards are essentially your initiative. So in this case, we're going to arrange these lowest to highest. So we have a 5, a 6, and a 7. And we'll explain in a little bit, you'll see in a little bit why it's important that we flip the cards in the manner that we do. So we begin resolving. The player who has the tentacle icon on the back of their card, so this is our player here, is going to get to go first, and they have the activity or their action banner here that says they're going to simply take one power, one soul, and one resolve card from this location. So they will do that. They'll take a resolve card, they'll take one soul token, and they will take a power token, and they'll place those in their player area, which for the purposes of this video is off camera. Now, it is important to note that these soul tokens, on the backs, they are all the same. On the other side of these tokens, you're going to have a point value anywhere from 0 to 2. And so you'll want to keep these soul tokens hidden from your opponents so that they don't steal soul tokens that are worth large numbers of points to you. The next player in turn order is the player with the eye on the back of their card. They are collecting 2 power tokens, so we will collect those 2 power tokens from this location. And then the third icon on this card indicates that they get to steal power from another player, so they'll simply steal the power that our tentacled player took, and they now have 3 power in their supply. And I'll pull this card up here so that you can see the icon here. So they're taking 2 power from the supply and then stealing a 3rd power from another player. So those players have been resolved. We then move on to the number 7, which is our hand player. And this player is simply taking 2 souls and 2 power. And it's important to note that some cards will give you an option as to which action you're going to take. All 3 of these cards just have a single action bar, so you'll see all of these icons are in a single rectangular shape, which means when I do that action, I get to take all of those particular resources. So this 7 being played allows me to take 2 power tokens and 2 of the soul tokens randomly, which again are going to be worth anywhere from 0 to 2 points each. That area now being resolved, we move on to the second location, and we do the same thing. We flip the cards over in the order they were played, and this is where you have the importance of flipping the cards over, because you'll notice we have 2 4s here. So we're going to move the 6 to the back because numerically it comes later, but the 2 4s are going to have to actually fight one another. So our tentacle player and our eye player are going to have to fight one another to determine who gets control of this particular character and who will get to take the 3 resolve cards from this particular location. We'll discuss fighting in a second. The winning player will get to take their turn as normal. The losing player will have their turn skipped. And if they happen to tie, both players will get to take their turn, but in the order that their cards were played, which is the importance of flipping the cards in turn order. Once this is resolved, once this fight has been resolved, and the winner or winners of the fight get to take their resolve cards from the center deck here at this location, our number 6 player will get to take the action. Our hand player will gain 2 power and will get to steal a 3rd. So we'll resolve that. Let's discuss fights and how fighting works. Fighting for control in 7 Souls is done using the player's resolve deck. At the start of the game, every player is going to have a 5-card resolve deck, and this deck is going to be made up by default of 4 horror cards or 4 fear cards and 1 focused card that gives them a success in a fight or a corruption attempt, and we'll talk about those in a second. But anyway, every player is going to will have 4 cards in their resolve deck, and of course, as you're taking the actions at the various locations, you can draw cards from the resolve deck to add more focused or even determined cards that have 2 successes on them into your individual deck. When you fight, these decks are going to be shuffled up, so each player will shuffle their decks up. Now, we have to keep in mind that even though each player starts with a deck of 5 cards, previous to this fight beginning, our tentacled player at this first location got to draw a resolve card. So he was able, this player was, the squid player, the tentacle player, was actually able to add a 6th card to the deck. So they actually have 2 successes in their deck at this point, 4 fears and 2 successes, which still aren't great odds. The players are going to, before flipping cards, they're going to determine if they want to commit any of their power tokens. If they choose to commit power tokens, they will simply state, I'm using 1 power, and they'll commit that power. Whether they win or lose the fight, or the power is successfully triggered, they will lose that power token. It's simply discarded and removed from the game and not able to be used any longer. Also important to note is if you declare that you're going to use a power token, so our tentacle player says, no, I'm not going to use a power token because he's got that extra card in there. Our eye player says, yes, I am going to commit a power token. So he'll take one of his power tokens and he'll lay it out showing that he's using it. He will then flip the top card of his resolve deck. In this case, he flipped one of the horror, one of the fear cards out that shows no successes. As a result, the power token he committed has no effect. These items, both the power token as well as the card that was flipped, are discarded from the game. So it's a way of kind of culling the deck out and being able to fight. Our tentacle player also is going to flip a card out. That's not the resolve deck. We'll flip a card out. He gains 1 success. Now, had he committed a power token, his power token would add an additional power, so he would have had 2 power. In this case, he has 1 power to the eye player's 0 power, so our tentacle player is actually going to win the fight, meaning he gets to resolve his effect first. Now, this card, instead of being discarded from the game, as the horror token was, this card is given to the losing player in the fight. So this focused card, this 1 success card, gets added to the eye player's deck, making his deck that much stronger and giving him a better chance of winning fights in the future. The tentacle player will get to resolve the number 4 action of drawing 3 of the resolve cards and adding those to the deck. And in these, it's important to show, I'll show these here. In the resolve deck, you're only going to find success cards, adding either 1, which are your focused cards, or 2 successes, which are your determined cards. You're only going to find successes in these decks. You will not find any of the horror cards. They are in a deck of their own off to the side and are distributed to players' decks by the players. The eye player, since he lost the fight, does not get to take his action, and then our hand player gets to collect 2 power tokens and steal a power token from another player, and he will steal from the eye player. So we'll just pile on the eye player for the purpose of this example. We then move on to the 3rd location, flip the cards over, we organize these in order, and this is an example of where you have optional choices to make. The number 1 player here, our eye player, you'll notice the actions are actually in individual squares now. The eye player will get to choose one of these actions to take. So they will either get to take a power token, a soul token, a resolve card, or they can do what's called sowing fear. Sowing fear allows you to take one of the horror cards that are up there in this deck and add it to another player's resolve deck, basically throwing another failure into their deck. But because each of these icons is in their own box, as opposed to the icons we saw previously, where we had multiple icons in a single box, the number 1 player, our eye player in this case, has to choose one of these 4 actions to take. They're going to go ahead and take a soul token because they're worth victory points, and victory points are really what matter in the game. So our eye player is simply going to take a soul token and place that in their supply. We then have the tentacle and the hand player, both have played 2s, and would then have to resolve a fight, just like we showed before. So that fight would get resolved where the tentacle player, who has quite a few successes in their deck at this point because they have they just drew 3 resolve cards from the previous fight they won, is going to face off against our hand player, who is still working with their standard deck of 5 cards, so 4 horrors and a power token. Both players declare that they are not going to use power. Our hand player flips a horror, and our tentacle player also flips a horror. In this case, both horror cards are discarded from the game, and we have a tie. So the players will simply resolve in turn order. So our tentacle player gets to resolve first, and he is going to simply, he's going to choose to sow fear. He's already doing really well in the fights. He's building a great resolve deck around successes with focuses and determinations, so he knows he's got some good successes. He's going to take one of these fear cards and give it back to the hand player who just lost a fear card in the fight. So that is what he's going to do with his action. He's going to choose to take this bottom action of sowing fear. And again, you have the option of sowing fear. They could choose to take 2 resolve cards, or they could choose to take a soul. And this is an example of why turn order is important in the case of a tie, and why it matters those cards being flipped the way they were. Our tentacle player chose to throw another horror card into the hand player's resolve deck. The hand player had planned to take a soul token to score some points. However, he wants to counteract now what was just done by another fear card being thrown in, so instead he's going to choose the middle option and draw 2 of the resolve cards from the resolve deck and add those to the resolve deck as well to help counteract the horrors that are in there. We have now completed the phase of activating locations and taking actions, and now we move on to the Investigator Attack. The back of the Investigator deck, the icon on the back of the deck will show which location is being attacked. So in this case, we have the church being attacked. You have a cross symbol that indicates the church being attacked. There is a stack of books that is the university being attacked. And then there is a key icon for the manor being attacked, which is our 2nd location here. And these icons are also on the board up under the investigator, so you don't have to remember which goes to which. And I should take this time to point out that everything you're looking at is a prototype, so iconography may change. So there may be some balancing things that have changed with cards over and above the prototype that I have here. So the final product could possibly look different. To the Investigator Attack, we have the church being attacked. So the investigator here is going to attack. This investigator is going to attack. He's looking to take 2 resolve cards, and he's attacking players that are in the back of the pile. So what this means is the investigator is going to attack the 2s in the back because they're at the back of the pile. If we had a situation like this, If this investigator were the one attacking, he would be attacking the players in the middle, and it would be attacking this particular location. And so our 6th player would be the only player being attacked. If, however, you have an icon where this circle is above the line, they're attacking the front player, or players if the numbers match, and are still attempting to take the same amount. So the players being attacked, in this case our tentacled player and our hand player, our 2s, they're being attacked by the investigator. The investigator's trying to take resolve cards from them. Much like the fight, they have to try and defend. So we're going to take our tentacle player first, because he's first there in turn order. He will decide if he wants to use any power to kick to possibly kick any successes up. Anything he doesn't block is going to cost him a card. He's going to choose to not boost with any power, and he flips out a single success. So he was able to block one of the investigator's attacks. However, the investigator was taking 2 cards. So he still has to give up his card. This card here gets discarded. The one that the tentacled player just used for the defense gets discarded from the game and removed, so his deck is culled a little bit further. And he must now place a random card from his resolve onto the investigator's card who's doing the attacking. And the reason that card gets placed on top of the investigator is because when the investigator gets corrupted, if someone's able to successfully corrupt that investigator, they also gain any resources on that investigator, in addition to the souls or the points that the investigator is worth. Our hand player does the same thing. However, he is going to commit a power token before he flips his first card, and he flips a success. This gives him 2 power. He successfully blocks both attacks that the investigator has thrown out, so he does not lose any of his resolve cards. The cards and the power token that were used are discarded from the game. That resolves the attack phase. At this point, player cards are going to be collected and given back to the players that they belong to, so these cards are not lost. So these cards are simply distributed back to the players who used them. So we'll discard these here. Once that is done, we will check to see if there's an in-game condition. There is not, because none of the locations have been depleted of 2 of their resources. We will then start the next round, and we will indicate the start of the next round by moving the top card of the Investigator deck to the bottom, revealing a new card. So now for this particular round, we know the university is going to be the location that is being attacked. And again, this particular investigator is attacking the characters in the middle of the pack and is looking to take 2 of their resolve cards. That is the basic play. I want to touch on a couple of other things in the game as far as other ways to score points, as well as corrupting the investigators. At the start of the game, based on player count, there are a number of altar cards that are set off to the side of the board. And players, anytime during their turn, can cash in the requisite number of power tokens to claim that altar for themselves. So for example, this altar is worth 5 points, or 5 souls. And a player would need to turn in 7 power tokens in order to claim that. So if a player had those 7 power tokens, they would simply take those power tokens, discard them from the game, so they're not going back into any kind of a supply, they're getting removed from the game. They would then, let's say our hand player is choosing to claim this altar. They've turned in the 7 power tokens. To claim that altar as their own, instead of pulling this altar and putting it into their play area to score points, what they do is they actually take one of the 7 characters that are in their hand. So you have your numbers 1 through 7. They're going to pick one of these characters. So let's say they want to take this 3 character. This card is going to get placed face down on top of the altar to show it has been claimed by this particular player. And at the end of the game, they will pull that altar into their scoring pile. The plus side of that is they've now scored 5 points at the end of the game by claiming that altar. The downside, however, is this character used to sit on the altar and claim the altar for them is no longer available to that player for the remainder of the game. A second way players can score points is by claiming one of the 3 blessing cards at the bottom. A player can only ever claim 1 altar, 1 blessing, and can only ever complete their calling card, their 1 calling card at the end of the game. And we'll talk about calling cards in a second. But the blessing cards at the bottom are claimed based on the prerequisites at the bottom. So for example, the first player to corrupt 2 investigators can take this blessing and score 3 points at the end of the game. This blessing is worth 5 points and can be claimed by the first player to accumulate 11 power. And this blessing is accumulated by the first player to acquire 11 soul tokens, not 11 souls in point value, but actually 11 tokens, and they will score 4 points by claiming this blessing. It's important to note that unlike claiming altars where we turn in the power tokens to claim the altar, you just have to have 11 power to claim this particular card. You don't actually turn it in. Same with the soul tokens. You don't actually have to turn the soul tokens in. You just have to have that number of tokens. Once a player has claimed a blessing, that blessing comes into their scoring area and they are no longer allowed to claim any other blessings for the remainder of the game. The third way that players will score points at the end of the game is by answering their calling. At the beginning of the game, players are dealt 2 calling cards and will pick one to keep and the other getting discarded from the game. At the end of the game, if they meet the prerequisite on their calling card, they will score the number of points printed on that card. So this particular calling card, for example, if this player has the least amount of power tokens at the end of the game, they will score 3 points. So they're going to be trying to spend power for whether they're defending against investigator attacks or they're defending against other players. They're going to be wanting to spending those power tokens or even cashing those tokens in to claim altars to get rid of them. This particular card will award the player 3 points if they end the game with the most soul tokens. And as another example, this particular card will give this player 7 points if at the end of the game their resolve deck contains the most successes. So this isn't having the most resolve cards in your deck, this is having the most total successes. So for example, if this card were at our tentacle players, if this was our tentacle player's calling card, they would be doing fairly well because their resolve deck currently has quite a few successes in it and are working really well toward that goal of having the most. I want to talk quickly about corrupting the investigators. As you are playing and going about the game, you have the opportunity with certain characters in your deck to try to attack the investigator or corrupt that investigator. In order to attack the investigator, you simply declare that that's what you're doing. So let's say we have an attack on this particular investigator here. If this investigator gets attacked and gets successfully corrupted, he is worth 6 points at the end of the game. The way that the attack happens is we look at the bottom here. You have a 4/4. This first number means that in order to successfully corrupt this investigator, I need to flip a total of 4 successes from my resolve deck. The second number, or in this case the second 4, means I can flip a maximum of 4 cards in order to do that. So if I'm attacking this particular investigator, and I have my resolve deck here, I will pull through, I need 4. I know that I need 4 total success. So I'm going to say, before every card, you can declare whether you're going to use power for that particular card or not. So I'm going to say I'm going to use 1 power for my first card. I flip the first card, and it is a success. Because I flipped a success, this power counts. I am now at 2 fear. For the second card, I'm going to choose to not use any power, and we flip out a fear, which is 0 successes. So I now have 2 cards to use to get 2 more fear in order to successfully corrupt this investigator. I'm going to go ahead and commit another power token to my third card. I flip that third card, and I get a success. So after flipping 3 cards, I have 2 successes printed on the cards, plus 2 power tokens, which is 4 total fear. I have successfully corrupted this investigator. This investigator will come into my scoring pile, my play area, will be worth 6 points at the end of the game. The cards and power tokens that I used to fight with are discarded from the game, so I'm losing the power tokens that I just played. I'm also losing, in this case, 2 successes and a horror card. The top card of the Investigator deck is flipped out and added to the newly empty or vacated space. It's also important to note out this could result in the location of the Investigator Attack changing. In this case, it didn't change because we went from a stack of books to another stack of books on the back of this deck. But if I had flipped that deck out, if I had flipped that card and we had the key on the back of the new, as the new card on the top of the Investigator deck, the location of the attack would move from the university to the manor at the end of the round. So it is important to note that Investigator attacks could potentially change the location of these particular attacks. If I was not successful in capturing that investigator or corrupting that investigator, I would lose all of the stuff that I played. So power tokens, any cards that I played would be lost, and the investigator would simply remain in play at that location. It's also important to note that had there been any tokens on the Investigator when I captured them, power tokens, soul tokens, or additional resolve cards, I would have claimed those and added those to my personal supply for future use during the game. So that is 7 souls from Inside Up Games on Kickstarter until June 5th. Definitely jump over and check it out before it's gone. Hopefully, like I said, you can late pledge for that down the road if you happen to have missed it. What do I think of 7 souls? First of all, the game plays up to 6 players, which is great for those large player count nights. It also plays really well at 2. The game itself is filled with all kinds of interesting choices. Which cards do I play down when I'm visiting the 3 locations? And I have to put three cards down. Obviously, I only have the numbers 1 through 7 represented in my hand once a piece, so I couldn't put a 3 in all 3 locations. I've only got 1 3. So I really have to plan out where I want to go, keep an eye on potentially the Investigator Attack itself. Maybe if I see that Investigator is going to hit and they're looking to take resolve cards, maybe I don't play actions leading up to that particular location that give me extra resolve cards, so that if I do get attacked by the Investigator and lose resolve cards, they're taking my fear cards, and I don't really care about those because they're failures anyway, and I want to be able to keep my successes, my focused and my determined cards. So there's a little bit of strategy there. There's also the strategy of, well, I think that's what I'm planning to do. Someone else may be planning that as well, so I may end up in a fight with another player prior to being able to even resolve my action. So I have to keep that in mind as far as what other players may be doing and what they may be thinking. So it's a little bit of trying to get into your opponent's head as well. The artwork. I will admit, when I first saw the art being spoiled on or being shown on, previewed on Facebook, Twitter, across social media, I wasn't really a fan of it. To me, it didn't really capture the H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu theme. It wasn't dark. It was very, kind of cartoony art. Almost some of the characters even looked a little almost steampunk to me. One of the characters looked kind of robotic in the appearance. However, when I got the game on the table and I saw the art in conjunction with the board and the cards, and actually got, with the way the game plays, this isn't your typical heavy H.P. Lovecraft game where you're fighting off really disgusting monsters and you're tracking doom and all those things that generally happen in a Lovecraft game. You're not doing those here. This is more of a deduction, trying to figure out what my opponent's doing so I can outwit them and take the power tokens and the soul tokens that I need and trying to beat them to the punch. So it's very much more a social game than it is a dark and gritty Lovecraftian, I'm fighting these gross, disgusting monsters kind of thing. When I actually played the game, the art makes perfect sense with the game, and I really have grown to love the art because it matches the style of game that 7 Souls is. Before, when I was just seeing the artwork on social media, all I knew was, here's a piece of, kind of cartoony art being shown to me as it's a Lovecraft game. And to me, they didn't match up. Once I played the game, though, those fears and those kind of preconceived notions went away. That definitely works well together. I really like the aspect of the Investigator attacks. You have an idea of where that Investigator could attack, and you even have an idea of if that Investigator attacks. So if I look at the back of the Investigator deck and I see that this round the Manor is getting attacked, and I look at the Investigator that is at the Manor and I see that they are attacking the cards in the middle, well, maybe I don't want to play a card that could land me in the middle. Maybe now's a good time to play 1s and 2s and 6s and 7s, because it keeps me, potentially keeps me from being, obviously 3s, 4s, and 5s are going to be a little bit more prone to falling in the middle of that lineup. Now, you still have to be careful with that, because if everyone is thinking that way, you could potentially all end up in the front of the pack, the back of the pack, or the middle. So you have to be really careful in that. But I like the fact that it gives you a little idea of where that Investigator attack might occur, so you can kind of plan for it. And that's just one other thing for you to pay attention to when you're deciding which card from my hand, which of my 7 cards am I going to play in order to make that decision. Because again, I may want to play a card that beats my opponent to the punch, so I want to go early in the round. But that Investigator is also attacking people who go early in the round, so maybe I don't want to do that so much. Maybe I want to try and throw a 3 or a 4 and hope that still lets me go ahead of the other players. So there's some really interesting decisions that have to be made based on that as well. There are also decisions of making, claiming altars is fantastic. Claiming an altar is great because you score points at the end of the game, and you're talking, some nice chunks of points, 5, 6, 7 points for an altar. But when do you do that? If I do it too early in the game, I'm throwing away one of my characters that could be handy in the long term, or that I could really use later in the game. However, if I wait too long, someone else could claim the altar I've had my eye on, and now I can't claim it because that altar can only be claimed by one player. And in a 3-player game like we saw in the video, there are only 2 altars that can be claimed. So if those 2 altars get claimed, the 3rd player is just out of luck, and they're going to have to find their points somewhere else. I really like that aspect of it. It's a little taste of push your luck in, maybe I can go one more turn without claiming this and hope so-and-so doesn't claim it before me. So I really like that. Overall, 7 Souls is fantastic, but I definitely would recommend checking out 7 Souls. Like I said, it's on Kickstarter until June the 5th. Jump over to Kickstarter if you're watching this video prior to June the 5th and check out the campaign. It's really awesome. Inside Up Games does a great job in all of the stuff that they've put out from production values. I have no doubt that despite the fact that this was a prototype, it still looks really good on the table. I have no doubt that the final production is going to be absolutely stunning on the table because all of the stuff Inside Up has done to this point has been that. So I have no qualms at all about recommending 7 Souls. Until next time, keep gaming, friends.